Chapter 4. The bear-paw poppy only grows in one part of the Mojave. The National Park Service rangers had to tally how many bear-paw poppies there are so that they could estimate a population. As the rangers were counting, they saw something down in the wash. It was a yellow Datsun without any license plates. There was a note saying the car was abandoned and whoever found it could have it. 5 days later, another ranger came by and was able to jumpstart the car. The car ran like a champ all the way back to the National Park Service maintenance. They ran the VIN but couldn't find any info. The car was traced back to Hertz, who said they sold the car used years ago and didn't want it back. It was a freebie, and the Park Service decided to use it for undercover drug busts. The car was used in numerous arrests and even in a high-value meth bust near Bullhead City. Even when Krakauer was interviewing a park ranger, he said the car is still running great and that it was really reliable. When McCandless was camping near Lake Mead in the Mojave Desert, a thunderstorm came. He was able to get his camping gear and climb up a wash, but the flash flood swept over the car. It wasn't strong enough to pull it away or do any damage, but it got the engine wet, so when he tried to start it, the battery was dead. He didn't report the car, however. His license was expired, his registration was expired, and he didn't have insurance. Also, he wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. Instead, he buried the license plates, took what he needed, buried his rifle and a few other things to come back to later, and burned the rest of his cash, $123, in a pile. For the next 2 months, McCandless traveled all over the West. He traveled to Lake Tahoe, hiked the Sierra Nevada and the Pacific Crest Trail, then wound up working on a ranch for a week. After he realized he wouldn't be paid, he left, and in Arcata, California, he met two rubber tramps named Jan Burres and her boyfriend Bob. These two would travel throughout the West selling books at flea markets. After talking a little bit, they realized he looked hungry, but he was proud because he was surviving only on edible plants. Jan had a kid about his age, so they asked if they could give him a ride. McCandless stayed with them at Orick Beach for about a week. Thereafter, he sent them a postcard about every month or so. After that, he traveled throughout the Pacific Northwest alone. A little bit before meeting Jan and Bob, McCandless got a ticket for hitchhiking. He gave his parents' address in Annandale. When the parents got the ticket, they were scared. They already called the police, but realizing the ticket was from California, they got a private investigator involved, Peter Kalika, who also did work for the DIA and CIA. The parents were also more worried when they found out he donated the rest of his money to Oxfam, and that the hitchhiking ticket didn't make sense because he loved his car so much. By the time the private investigators started looking into California, McCandless had already left to the Cascade region in the northwest and moved east along the plains to South Dakota, where he met Wayne Westerberg. When Westerberg was jailed, he decided to head south for winter. After going to California, he made his way to Arizona and bought a used aluminum canoe and decided to take it down the Colorado River to Mexico. As he paddled down the river for about a month, he stopped in Yuma at the end of November to get supplies and write Westerberg a postcard. One of the lines reads, "As for me, I've decided I'm going to live this life for some time to come. The freedom and simple beauty of it is just too good to pass up." He managed to pass the Mexican-American border going south by sneaking through a dam spillway and make his way into the canals. He talked to officials and locals to work his way to the Gulf of Mexico, but he wound up in a big swamp. A group of duck hunters agreed to tow him and his boat to the Gulf, and once there he paddled south. By New Year, he made it to the Gran Desierto. He headed south again, but was caught in a storm that almost killed him. At that point, he decided to ditch the canoe and walk back to the border. He had not seen a single person in 36 days and lived off of 5 pounds of rice. In all, this gave him the confidence he needed to later brave the Alaskan wilderness. When he made it to the border, he had to stay the night in jail because he didn't have an ID and made up a story about chasing a Colt python over the border and not realizing it. The next 6 weeks, he went as far east as Houston and as far west as the Pacific. He even went to LA to try to get an ID and a job. He realized, however, that he was now too awkward to be around people. 6 days later, he camped at the Grand Canyon with a German couple and wrote how he is not the same Alex that set off in July of 1990. Just 6 months after, he'd lost 25 pounds, but he was the happiest he had ever been. He made it back to where he lost his car, though it was impounded by now, and he dug up the stuff he buried. He then made it to Las Vegas and found a job in an Italian restaurant. He writes in his journal that on February 27, he buried his backpack outside the city, a trick he learned a while ago in order for his stuff not to be stolen. And even though he damaged his camera by burying it, the trip was worth it for the memories and for the triumph of living life.